Hello, everyone. It's Stephen from Tostemac, and welcome to another Tostemac Podcast. On these podcasts, we talk about all kinds of things, like maybe something from my childhood or personal experience. It could be about a certain topic about autism, or it could be like today, where I'm introducing you to some amazing people. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking to Miss Isabelle from Faces for Autism.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you. It's such an honor.
No problem. Thanks for being here. So today I wanted to take this podcast to take some time to talk about what Faces for Autism is, like how it began, what's the journey been, and where you're at right now. So let's dial the clock back all the way to the beginning. Like, how did you first get involved with the autistic world in the first place?
Well, that's a really good question. Faces for Autism is an acronym, and it stands for Families for Autistic Children, Education and Support. And that's the easiest way for me to remember because the message is in the name, and education and support is what our organization does. We started out locally in southern New Jersey in 2002 because my son was diagnosed in 2001. Actually, I can honestly say I have twins who are boy-girl twins. My son was diagnosed at 18 months. And when I found out, I remember it was September 11th, the day that the towers fell in New York.
Oh.
And I was in the backyard with my son and daughter playing with another set of twins. And it turned out one of them also had autism. And the therapist said to me, they were not allowed to tell you when your child was that age, that early. They said they could tell you that there was a diagnosis, but back then in the dark ages of autism, they would tell you that there were certain markers for certain developmental delays. They never used the word autism until much later. And
Really?
I often thought when I talked to the developmental pediatrician who diagnosed my son, I went back to him when my son was 3 years old and I said, I want you to do me a favor. And he said, sure. And I said, could you stop not telling parents that it's the A word? He said, well, that traumatizes the parents. I don't like to use that word. And I said, you just set me back 6 months by not telling us my son's diagnosis. He said, PDD-NOS. And when you say PDD-NOS, and this is before the internet, and you don't look it up, the guy said, I remember saying to him, well, thank goodness it's not autism. Well, guess what? My son still has autism. He's 23 years old. And
wow, I didn't think that would actually be a recommendation, because like when I got the diagnosis, when I was a child, my mom was the one who spotted it first before even the medical experts.
Sure,
like
sure.
She was talking to the medical experts like, look, I see the signs. I know what's going on here, but I never heard about doctors actually withholding the word autism as if it was supposed to be something bad. Like, when was this around when you were?
That was 2001. And
that was 2001.
Mm-hmm. And
wow. Cause like the 90s, I can understand, because the 90s was a pretty difficult time in particular, not only because of the fact that not many people knew about autism at the time, but there was also that harmful article in the Lancet by Andrew Wakefield. I'm sure you remember all about that. But so it's like, if that was from like the 1990s, I can understand that, but 2001 was it?
Yes. And
wow.
The part that I find fascinating is that it is still a doctor who is in practice, is a renowned developmental pediatrician who diagnoses many people. And we also have, as parents, we had this kind of amusing joke going that on the back of his door, when he closed the door and said goodbye, that there was a dartboard on there, and there were diagnoses of Asperger's, PDD-NOS, autism, classic autism, et cetera. And he just would go, Okay, I think that's what it is today.
Classic autism. Didn't realize there was a classic or a modern form of autism.
Yes, exactly. And the world has changed. Now with the DSM-5, we have the opportunity to look at it as the wide spectrum. And I am understanding, well, with the new phraseology of neurodiversity, which did not exist back in 2001.
Right.
People who have the diagnosis of ADHD are walking around talking about the fact that they are in the neurodiverse universe, which places me as a neurodivergent person because I have ADHD. My daughter has ADHD, my husband, and we are people who are mindful of that, but people using that terminology loosely. I don't know if that's come up for you in the past, but I find it fascinating that we are coming up with new verbiage by the year, by the day.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I haven't even heard some of this stuff until now. So, so you got the diagnosis, and then from there, how was it like being with an autistic child, like raising them and maybe dealing with criticism from people outside who just don't understand? Because I know that my mom had to deal with it a few times back when I was a child. So I'm wondering, how did you deal with situations of like the outsiders looking in and not really fully understanding what's going on?
Well, excellent question, because that is the reason that I started this support group. And I put a flyer up in a local convenience store. The local newspaper found it and called me. And the next thing you know, my family is on the front page of the newspaper for the entire.
Wow.
Yeah. And the part that was shocking was that we had not really told many people. So we were the first people to be talking about autism in our region. What scared me was that, I thought, well, now that we are creating awareness and we are meeting other people, because I wanted to meet other people who had loved ones on the spectrum so that we could compare notes and help each other, educate and support and learn from the community, because the school districts were the only experts per se, other than the therapists and the physicians. So what ended up happening was we would go out in the community and I'm thinking, it's all figured out. Everyone knows that my child has autism and I don't have to say anything anymore. He's acting differently. Little did I know, I'll never forget being in a Kmart with my kids who were 2.5 years old in the shopping cart. And my son wanted yet another Buzz Lightyear doll. Okay. And I said no. And my daughter was quietly sitting, playing with whatever toy she had chosen. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say there were 2.5. So my son is having a tantrum in the store. And this is typical for any toddler.
Right.
So I remember these teenagers, these seniors peering down the aisle as my son was screaming. Mm-hmm. And shaking their heads at me in shame that I would let my son be so spoiled. And they're shaking their hands. In the meantime, they don't understand that my son is having a meltdown because Buzz Lightyear is his thing. Right. And Mom, this Buzz is here. So therefore I want this Buzz. And he's nonverbal. He is somebody who wants what he wants. And he's trying to express it. And the only way to express it is by screaming. Mm-hmm. So my daughter, she falls by the wayside because she's in the cart and I forget all about what's going on with her because I'm trying to protect my son from climbing out of the cart. So you get this.
Right.
So my son can't take it. So he takes this, I'll never forget, this section of my hand between my thumb and my forefinger, mm-hmm. and he bites it as hard as he possibly can. So it's like a horror movie. Blood starts squirting all over. And people are just staring at me like I am this pariah of society. I am trying to hold it together. In the meantime, I finally get the shopping cart out of the store and I think, okay, God, just get me to the car. I can do this. I get outside and there's a woman who walks up to me, kind, sweetest lady you've ever met, puts her hand on my shoulder and pats it and says, sweetheart, everything's going to be okay. And I'm like, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Someone who finally understands. She says, I know what's wrong with him. And I go, oh, you do? And she says, yeah, he's got the devil in him. Let's pray over him.
Oh, what? Are you kidding me?
Oh, I can tell you that God has a sense of humor.
It was like, I feel like that's something that should be on a comedy routine. Like, you're having a rough time, you're just getting the kids to the car, and then this woman comes to you, put your hand on the shoulder, and says, it's gonna be okay. Oh, thank God. Like, I know what's wrong with your children. I was like, you do? Yeah, they're possessed by the devil.
Yeah, sure. Okay, that's good.
It's like, maybe she meant well, maybe she was misguided, but it's like they're way off the mark on that one.
Well, the best part, that was my favorite part. But the best part is I get it all together, get them in the car, put on the car seats, sit them down, and then I realized that my daughter is holding toys that we never paid for.
Oh no.
So not only has Satan taken over, have we bloodied the entire store, but we have shoplifted as well.
Well,
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I was not expecting that kind of story.
And
that's an interesting way to make an impression. Like,
yes.
Kid wanted a toy, getting your hands bloody, and then shoplifting.
Yeah, just an average day. Not a mom. But what I ended up doing was I said out loud, I wish I had business cards I could hand out to the people who are staring at people and saying, what's wrong with you? And I got ones that said, so it's autism, stop staring, something like that. If your staring could help him and cure him, here you go. This is, learn more about it. So that's what I did. I made up business cards and I gave them out to people in our support group. But I also had a handbag or like a shopping bag that I carried. And in the biggest letters you ever saw, it said autism support, autism awareness, whatever it was. And I carried that wherever I went. And when people would see him writhing on the floor over heaven knows what, I would point at the words and they'd go, oh,
okay.
Now, and my favorite part of it is we are very involved with another awareness group called 21 Down, and it is for Down syndrome. And I don't know if your listeners are aware of this, but there is a very large percentage of people who are on the autism spectrum who have siblings who also have Down syndrome, because there's a connection genetically, the correlation there. And we would talk about, and the difference is that when you have a child with Down syndrome, often through an ultrasound, amniocentesis, they can find out whether a child has the missing chromosome from 21 down, the 21st chromosome. So when I talk to my friends, if you've met a person with Down syndrome, you know that they have physically differences. People with autism do not have these differences. So I would joke with my friends who have these situations, and I would say to them, it's just not fair. We need, like a something on the forehead that says, yeah. And they go, because when you have a child with Down syndrome and they're having a tantrum in the store, people go, give them some slack. But not with
somebody. That is unfortunate because for autistic people, there's not really something so obvious that sticks out, or not like a huge telltale sign that'll immediately tell someone that this person has autism, because the same signs that point towards autism can point towards other things as well. Like it could point towards ADD, ADHD, or Fragile X syndrome. It could point to multiple things. And unfortunately, that does make it difficult for going out in public with autistic children, especially in the grocery stores and retail places. I feel like those are like common places where parents are like judged by people around them, kind of like how you were. So it has to do with autism not being so apparent, but another part of it has to do with not understanding what autism is, but also I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but there could be this difference in understanding in terms of like the different generations. Like you could probably hear like, back in my day, they did this, or back in my day, they wouldn't do that. So being stuck in that mentality or stuck in that point in time, it could have an impact on someone's judgment in the current day and age. And I feel like it's important to make sure to understand how things are going on in the here and now, but also understand that it's not all set in stone. There are some things that are subject to change. Like all things change in time, like our understanding of certain things, certain social norms and expectations. Change is just a part of life. Now, you mentioned earlier that you had this handbag that said autism, or you had these business cards that said like autism, stop staring, that kind of thing. How effective were those? Like, did you did they actually make a difference, or was it what?
Well, I think it's an interesting point that you bring that up, because the majority of people who were staring or clicking their tongues were people who were, say, over 50 at the time, grandparents.
Right.
My son we would go to Burger King, because the one thing that I can tell you is that if you have a child who is on the spectrum and they need practice being in the world, so you go to the places that will accept you. And if you get into Burger King and we lasted 2 minutes, then the next time we would last 4 minutes, then the next time we'd last 6 minutes. We did not do the drive-through. We came in and we sat down, because no one goes to Burger King and sits down. So except maybe some of the older people who were getting their senior coffee or what have you, and they didn't want their quiet interrupted. So often I would be handing out a business card there. What ended up happening, and they would go, oh, so we saw that dawn of recognition. Oh, and I think it did make a difference. One of the things that made the biggest difference was the t-shirts. And I had one that said something like, if you think you're stressed, try having autism. And one of the teachers said to me, and I thought this was interesting. She said to me, how dare you label your child? And I said, I'm not labeling him. I am offering information so that people can stop judging him. And she didn't understand that. She thought that that was cruel. And I thought, well, which one's more cruel? Having him go out in the world and not be given a fair shake. So I think wearing those t-shirts in the beginning was a dawn of recognition for people, like, because I can tell you that a lot of people thought that, again, that people who were on the spectrum were institutionalized and you never saw them again. People with Down syndrome, people in wheelchairs, people would say, you don't see them in public, so they must not come out, let them go where they're available. Well, that's why we have wheelchair ramps. That's why we have Braille menus. That's why we have headphones when you go to the movie theater. Let's include people. So what we started doing is doing practice runs with our community and offering sensory-friendly movie nights. So you could go to the movie theater and practice being in the community, having sensory-friendly nights at restaurants so that you could go to a TGI Fridays and go order a meal. And okay, so most of the people in there were people who knew somebody with autism or had their family with them. And it was an awakening for the employees, because then they saw, okay, the thing I need to do is, the minute these people arrive, is bring out the French fries. So that kid has something to do. Bring out the crayons, bring out the coloring books, whatever it is. But what, as parents, we ended up doing was being prepared and having that magic blue bag of mine, had all of that equipment in there so that I knew. I always felt like Mary Poppins when I brought out the bag.
Yeah, I think a lot of us think about Mary Poppins and pulling out everything from that magical bag. So it actually had an impact in terms of like the employees' understanding of autistic individuals then.
Most definitely. And what ended up happening more often than not was that became the beginning, the inroads of a conversation about potential employment for some people down the line, so that they would see, oh, okay, there are different types of autism. There are different needs for each person. Everyone is an individual. And they would learn that. And a lot of times what I ended up finding, which I thought was even more of a comfort, and now more nowadays, where people would have the dawn of recognition. Yeah, my nephew, my cousin, my brother, he has autism, so-and-so, she does that. And now another step further, people I'll meet somebody and they'll say, my daughter, and she's a chef in this restaurant. And this one, so-and-so started a software company. So we went from, oh my gosh, they're shoplifting and they have the devil in them, to they run a business.
I swear, I'm never going to forget that story. Like, I'm going to tell my mom about this the next time I see her. And I think she's going to laugh about that. It's just like,
oh my goodness.
I mean, it definitely sucked at the time, but looking back at it, it's just a funny story.
I definitely think that was, instead of a traditional person coming and giving comfort, I think humor is sometimes God's way of getting your attention. I definitely do.
Yeah, definitely.
Because that snapped me right out of it.
It's like you mentioned earlier about this person like getting mad at, like, just saying like, how dare you label someone? And to an extent, I can understand some of it, like just labeling people with a certain title kind of takes away a bit of the person or personality in the mix, kind of like with Sean Murphy with The Good Doctor. It's just labeled an autistic person. You see more of the autism rather than the actual person, or like Rain Man, or like Forrest Gump. So to a degree, I can understand that, but I think what I wanted to ask that person, if I was there at the time, what would you have done? Because like, if you had this issue with like the t-shirt that says this person has autism, what would you do alternatively? Because I would actually be genuinely curious about what that person would have done if that person was in your shoes.
Right.
But it's part of history is a whole bunch of what ifs, Okay. And there was actually, back in California, because I originally grew up, born and raised there was this Mexican restaurant that my mom would bring me and my younger brother when he was born a few years later. Mom would bring us to this Mexican restaurant. The first time, she was just letting the manager know that, hey, this person, sorry, I just got to fix the mic here. So she was talking to the manager and letting him know that, hey, my children are autistic and we're trying to get them more used to like public places and how to behave there. Mm-hmm. So we were thinking about coming here regularly. Would that be okay? And they were cool with that. So basically we made it I think it was either a weekly or bi-weekly thing where me, my mom, and my brothers would go to this Mexican restaurant, enjoy some food, but also learn about like how to interact here, like how to do table manners, how to interact with the waitress or waiter, and also not going under the table every 5 or 10 minutes.
Yes.
Like I would go down there all the time, and it was like my mom didn't get too angry about it. She kept hinting that no, you're not supposed to do that. So me and my younger brother, and maybe my older brother sometimes too, would try to go under the table and kind of mess around until like the food came. But eventually we started to get the idea that, hey, maybe that's not like a good idea, and there's some other stuff to do on the table rather than under the table. So
so true. Well, I was going to say, I've had the pleasure on several occasions of talking with Temple Grandin. And
you actually talked to her?
Yes. And we've
Nice.
had her for a couple of conferences, and I've met her when my child was just diagnosed. I got to meet her. That was the first person I ever met other
Oh,
than my son.
wow.
So it was really, and that was 2001, I got to meet her. She was at the university that I attended. But one of the things that she focuses on is manners. She thinks that manners are key, and you need to learn manners. You can't be grabbing, because my son used to love to grab the French fries off of people's tables, all of those.
Yeah.
But the other aspect of it is video rehearsal, that we learned a lot, because there are a lot of kids who are hesitant. I knew a young man who had a fear of going through certain doors, and it got to the point where he was afraid to go through any doors. So that fear started to paralyze him. So what we did was and this is when we still had camcorders, we would video rehearse him and show, this is what we're doing. Take his brother and walk through the door and show him what to expect in the movie theater, and sit down and show. And we would ask for permission, and we do these things with restaurants and different things. And we made up videos to say, this is what you need to do. And that suddenly became commonplace. And you saw that a lot on a lot of sites teaching about inclusion and teaching school districts how to get kids to go to the cafeteria. But also, I'm sure you're familiar with Social Stories, where they had the PEC system, where they would teach people, how to say sentences and things. Do you know about the picture exchange?
Yeah. I think there was a practice similar to that back when I was in grade school. It was where there were parts of a sentence that were scattered all over a board, and it was in Velcro. And one of the assignments that me and some other classmates had to do was we had to take the bits and fragments of the sentences and just form them into a proper sentence.
Right.
So I saw that like in school, but I also saw that I think I may have saw that in some educational games too. I just don't remember which one. Was it Jumpstart or Reader Rabbit?
Yes.
One of those two.
So a lot of those are precursors to traditional early autism training, where talking about the picture exchange, now we could use actual photographs that we took ourselves. But there were Velcroed words, phrases, letters, and things like that. And my son was nonverbal back when he could say a few words, but by age 4, he could not put a sentence together. So what ended up happening, going to speech therapy, they were using those little segments, and he got to learn how to put the sentence together. And I'll never forget the first time, because food motivates him. So he learned to say, I want snack. And that was his first sentence. And of course we all, no dry eyes in the house, because he was saying what he wanted. And now he's able, thankfully, to express himself. There are days when he's not able to, but I know so many people who are so frustrated, and their behaviors are as a result of the fact that they are not able to say what they want to say. And I remember there was a gentleman who used to go out. He was he's probably 18 years old, would go out and was on the autism spectrum. He would go and they would ask him, what would you like for lunch? And he would say hamburger. The word hamburger would come out of his mouth. They'd bring him a hamburger. He would have a hissy fit, kicking and screaming and throwing it and carrying on, and they'd have to take him out. So this happened 3 times. It turns out he doesn't want to say hamburger. He wanted to say hot dog, but his mouth would not let him say it. So if they had waited a few seconds and waited for him to see if he said no, or they had given him a picture, we might have had a different story and a lot more success.
Yeah, because the pictures and the word construction practice, I think those are really effective practice tools, because autistic people in general, and I'm not saying it for like every single autistic person, but for autistic people in general, having visual tools is very important, because just hearing the instructions might not be enough. Like even to this day, like if people gave like verbal instructions or a verbal description, I try my best to visualize it in my head so I can figure out like what it is to do. But there are times that I just can't wrap my head around it, because at the end of the day, I just can't visualize it. And if I can't visualize it, I don't understand it.
Yeah. And I'm the same way. I'm very visual. And if you go past 3 instructions on directions on anything, it could be on making a document, it could be on going to a location in my car. If you tell me beyond 3, I'm lost, and my brain cannot process all 3 visuals at a time.
Right. It's like, unless we actually see like the demonstration, like the actual demonstration, it'll be harder to figure out what it is that needs to be done. But I think we may have gotten a little bit sidetracked up. That's my fault, unfortunately. I apologize. But getting back to this group you formed, Faces for Autism, what's that about, and like what kind of growth and changes did it go through throughout the years?
Well, we started out as a support group because I worked in a hospital before that for 10 years, and I ran community programs and conferences and things. And I thought, well, I've run support groups before. So I asked an expert psychologist to come in and help facilitate the meetings. So what would happen was I would educate the community, have them come in. We ended up at one point, we had 75 people in a room at a time. The thing that made it different was that we set it up as an experience, because I knew that parents would not come out unless they had childcare. So we made arrangements, and I rounded up all of the high school students that I could, and we would go to a school with a gymnasium with activities, and the kids would be playing. We would tire out the kids while the parents got to listen to a speaker who talked about a topic such as sensory integration disorder, auditory processing, whatever it was at the time. Right. And we would bring in the experts, and what happened is it started to snowball. And we add more and more people. We started a nonprofit organization to have activities. We have picnics, we have proms, we have all kinds of activities, dances, interactive. I think we're doing cornhole this season as well. We have a cornhole team. So what ends up happening is that the community gets involved. There's another aspect of what we do that's called Massey's Mission. And it's named after one of the guys in our group who is on the spectrum. His grandparents helped us to fund a program where we offer adaptive swim scholarships to people on the autism spectrum, because
Wow.
The number one cause of death in autism is drowning, because they are drawn to water. So what we do is we speak to 3 different area pools who have instructors, and they go through certain criteria so that they can teach these kids how to have swim survivability in the water. So it could be from age 3 on up. We've had 35-year-olds who have taken the test. And it's so important because we live by the water. And it was prompted by a young gentleman that we had who was being babysat by his grandparents and fell in the pool and drowned. He was right under supervision. Wow. And they did not see him. He had grabbed onto a chair and fallen in, and they did not see him. So I felt compelled to make a difference for a lot of families by doing that. And now we also we have strong involvement with Project a Lifesaver, which is because elopers, again, near the water, kids and adults on the autism spectrum are known to escape very easily. So what they have is they have a device that they can wear that the police are able to find out how to find them, because it'll send off a device sound or a ping or what have you.
Well, it's not just about like finding them, but also like how to interact with them, because there are a lot of autistic people and a lot of families of autistic people that are probably too intimidated by the police or won't even give the police force a chance. So there has to be this level of trust, but there also has to be this training in terms of like how to find this person, but also how to interact with them. Because if you scare them, that's just going to make things worse.
Yes. And actually, we've done that training with our local police and fire departments. We've also made up kits for them so that when they have it in their truck or their glove compartment, it's full of the picture exchange where it says, I need help, and the children can point to it, or the adults. I'm scared, I'm hurt, whatever it is. We have sensory toys in there. We have all kinds of information for the police officers, the firefighters, the EMTs, so that they can help the families to find or to calm their loved one. And it's been very successful, because it's something that has to continue happening, because we keep hiring new people. And with that turnover, whole new group of people need to learn again. And that's been a focus of ours as well.
Nice. So you're actually teaching like swim instruction. Sorry, let me get my words right. So you're reaching out to swim instructors. I wish I could speak English properly today. So you're able to reach out to swim instructors, fire departments, police departments, educating them about autism. That's fantastic. So
Yes.
You've been at this for like, or Faces for Autism has been around for 20 years, if I remember correctly.
20 years. And it's also, this year is the 20th anniversary of something that we started called Bubbles for Autism, that is done all over the world. And now bubbles have become synonymous with autism awareness, because children use them in speech therapy to learn about breathing, et cetera, and to engage with eye contact has been used very much. So what we did was...
Well, it's actually the first time I've heard of that. I just blew bubbles for the fun of it.
And what happens in schools is that we actually went for the Guinness World Record, and we got schools all over the world to do this in 2005,
wow,
6, 7, and 8, I believe. And it ended up being all over the world. India, oh my gosh, Australia, the Dominican Republic, it was everywhere. What ended up happening was they contacted us and told us how many people in their school district were blowing bubbles. So we ended up, I believe that we ended up with 55,000 people blowing bubbles at the same time on April 1st to create awareness for autism. And what happened in the school districts, it became something, it started out very organic, because I wanted to teach the kids in the school district about my son, that he's different, not less. And we wanted to show that he liked to do the same kinds of things they did. So we took the kids out in the schoolyard and blew bubbles. What ended up happening was other schools found out what we were doing and wanted to do it. So now schools use that day to read books about autism, to teach kids about autism and other things, to teach them about inclusion, kindness, and friendship. And what we had them doing is making giant human ribbons, awareness ribbons, on the schoolyard. And I got to participate with schools all over the world doing this, because they ended up, I think, like 1,500 people making a ribbon in the schoolyard. It was the most powerful thing. And then blowing bubbles.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, 55,000 people blowing bubbles at the same time. I mean, that's definitely something. So we're definitely seeing that Faces for Autism is having a great impact on the autistic community and people outside the autistic community. So looking at where you're at right now, if you could tell your past self anything, what would it be? And I see that smile on your face. It's like, oh, I got a whole lot to say to you.
What I would tell myself is to take my vitamins and take care of myself. Get more sleep, because autism parents don't get any sleep.
Yeah, I think my mom can testify to that.
And I would also invite people who connected with my son in the beginning that I didn't ask them to come back as much. I would get more people involved in my son's circle of friends and community, because people were kind and nice and polite, but people did not come to our house to play. Our house was not the one where people came. And my daughter is typical, neurotypical, but she does have ADHD, so she's neurodiverse as well. I didn't even think of it that way, but yeah. And she had friends, girl friends. So my son had typical peer experiences, so we were blessed by that. However, girls are different than boys in that I wanted the boys, he had a couple of boys in school who were nice to him, but I wanted somebody to invite him over to go somewhere. And I think initially, there was a lot of fear involved in that. So I ended up having to go to a lot of parties with my son and keep him from, because his obsession is videos, VHS tapes and DVDs.
Right.
He has a visual memory, and he also has this affinity. I wish he could memorize lottery numbers or something for the next day, but his superpower is kind of bizarre. He can find videos and DVDs in your house wherever they are. He knows exactly where they are. He actually, at one point, used to know which videos you had before he went in your house. Like, I'll never forget.
Really?
Yeah, it was kind of a bizarre thing. I remember we were in the car, and it was before I had taken the child lock and turned it on the back door of the car.
Right.
He jumped out of the car, we were at his grandfather's house, and his grandfather was talking to a neighbor who we didn't even know.
Right.
And he ran past them and he said, "I'm going to get Chitty Chitty Bang Bang." And we said, what? And I'm chasing my son as fast as I can. And the very nice man looks at me and he goes, "It's okay. I have a granddaughter with autism." Well, as we ran in the door, my son starts going through this cabinet. And we've never met these people in our lives, never been in their house, don't even know them. And the granddaughter was there at the table eating cereal in the middle of the afternoon. And the grandfather came in, and the grandmother and the mother were there, and they said, "Oh my gosh, our daughter is nonverbal and she has autism. We've never seen another person with autism. We don't go anywhere. We don't do anything." And
Right.
I thought, okay, universe, you just sent me into a random person's house to have a conversation with a total stranger and apologize for my son rummaging through their cabinets. What's going on here? What's the lesson? Okay, you sent me another autistic person. So I pulled out my bag and handed them a business card. And I said, "Well, you're welcome to come to our meetings." And I'm thinking, okay, that can't possibly be it. While this is all happening, my son is still rummaging and they're not even noticing. And he stands up and he goes, "Oh, here it is. Gotta go."
So it's like, so wait, he had no clues, no hints, no idea that Chitty Chitty Bang Bang would be at that person's place. So so he goes like, "I'm gonna go watch this movie," and then somehow manages to find it.
But come on, if you had the choice of your ultimate superpower, would it be finding videos in people's houses? Come on.
So it could be either that or having some psychic ability to see into the future. Like here, let me see. Let me see if I can call Thomas and predict what he's going to say next. Let's see. I'm gonna call him and I'm gonna predict he's going to say, "Steven, why are you calling me? We're literally right next door."
So funny. So funny.
Okay, the phone's ringing. He hung up on me.
I was just going to say, did he hang up on you? He's like, "Why are you calling me?"
So much for psychic powers are seeing into the future.
That's really funny. Well, I would go with time travel. Somebody actually asked me that yesterday, and I originally said, I don't know, be invisible, but no, I said time travel for sure. Because then you could tie in all that stuff where you could know who won a sporting event and all that stuff. And then you could be a millionaire and it wouldn't matter and all that good stuff. But anyway.
Yeah. All right. So I'm not sure about time travel for me. I know that's going to be all sorts of complicated nonsense like multiverse theory, single verse theory, time paradoxes, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I just saw the Atom Project that just came out, that film. With Ryan.
Wait, that's on Netflix, I believe. Yeah, yes, that's it. Dad was showing that to me a couple days ago.
Oh, it's excellent. Really enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, my dad definitely enjoyed that movie. So, we're getting close to the end of the podcast. I do want to ask one last question. If you were to give advice to any parent out there who's raising an autistic child, like someone who's still trying to figure out what autism is, what would your advice be to them?
Well, what I say often to people is to follow your gut instincts because they're usually right, and to love your child. And it sounds really hokey and silly, but if you love them, and you make every decision based on the fact that you love this person more than anybody on the earth, you're going to be guided by that North Star that takes you to the next decision and the next decision and the next decision. And they often say that you survive 100% of your worst days. So there is a lot of those days when you are a parent of a child on the spectrum. I know so many, I can say after 20 years, I know so many young adults who are succeeding, who are thriving, who are living the dreams that their parents dreamt for them. And it is so empowering to see that. I often wonder, because my son is not one of those people that you're going to see as a successful business person or in a career that changes the world, but he does change the world with his awareness, one step at a time out there in the world. And that's what I want people to understand. There might be difficult behaviors, but that person is here, and you are that person who's going to help them through that process. And I know your mother would say the same thing. She must be very proud.
She would.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, that pretty much does it for the podcast. Ms. Isabelle, thank you so much for taking time today to talk about your personal experience and Faces for Autism. And it sounds like you're really making a difference out there.
Thank you so much. You're a good interviewer. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I had a good time.
Well, I've had some practice here and there. So anyway, thank you very much for watching this podcast, everybody. If you enjoy what you see, consider subscribing to Tostemac and hitting the bell icon, or rather clicking the bell icon, I should say, to stay up to date in our latest videos. Also, I will be leaving a link in the video description below, so that way you can check out the Facebook group, Faces for Autism, to learn more about what they do, where they are, and what activities are coming up. So, thank you very much for watching this podcast, and until the next one, see you later.